Hey, hi. Welcome to Someone Else's Movie, the original podcast where an actor, writer, director, or nebulous industry figure gives a little love to a movie they didn't make. I'm Norm Wilner, TIFF's Senior International Programmer for Canada, and this is the other thing I do. My guest this week is Alyssa Rallo Bennett, a producer and director who's one of the founders of Stone Street Studios, which for decades has provided young actors the chance to work in film and television shoots in a collaborative space. Her latest feature, The Arrival, follows a group of people in a Manhattan restaurant as they wrestle with personal issues over the course of a single afternoon. It's just been released on digital and on demand, and you should check it out. Alyssa picked Leave the World Behind, Sam Esmail's slow-boil thriller starring Julia Roberts and Ethan Hawke as parents whose Long Island getaway is disrupted when two strangers, played by Mahershala Ali and Mahala, turn up at their rental house telling them they're the homeowners, seeking shelter after a blackout in New York City. And that's just the first act of the film, which then rolls through what certainly looks like a societal collapse in a series of eerily convincing stages, none of which bodes particularly well for the future of the world, or these characters in particular. Also, Kevin Bacon is there. That's how you know it's serious. This is Someone Else's Movie.
I mean, it's just so importantly about what's going on in the world right now, but in such a very universal psychological way through its characters. So it's not, pedantic or polemic, in any way. It's not, it's not like a message film per se, but it's just so creative too. It takes license and just has a refreshing way. I just loved it.
And I'm guessing you saw it on Netflix the same way most people did. There was a really brief theatrical release. Did you catch it on the big screen? I wasn't lucky enough to.
I did not. No, we didn't. But we do have a big screen. So I watched it on a big screen, and it was so wonderful. And because of your interview, I went back and watched it again, just because I was like, let me see it, how it stands up and how I feel about it. And it was so great to see it again. It held up so beautifully. And of course, having seen it, you appreciate so many new moments that, were there to see for you,
Yeah. The thing that really got to me on second viewing is the elegance of the film. Like the fact that it is maybe the cleanest, nicest, most aesthetically pleasing depiction of a global disaster, or at the very least, an American collapse that we're likely to see. And that's this fascinating push and pull to me about the way Sam Esmail is presenting it all. It's deliberately removed, right? We only know what the characters know. We don't follow anyone else. There is no larger perspective. And it's a film that plays with the idea of assurance and confidence by being really clean and really quiet. Even the disasters are the things that we see, like an oil tanker running aground in the very first act, or a plane crashing directly into the beach where Mahershala Ali's character is standing. In the second act, they're presented with a grandeur and an almost beauty that is really disturbing on second viewing, because I listened to the episode of Script Apart that Esmail did with Al Horner, and he said that he wanted to play out the length of the disaster moments to just show us characters refusing to accept that things are going to hell. That it's in the opening moments of the tanker grounding where Clay, Ethan Hawke's character, just says, well, it's going to stop eventually, right? And that's his whole concept for the movie, that you are trying as a viewer and as the characters in the film to will society to rebalance and just come back to itself. And it simply doesn't. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, and it's very in line with how certainly I'm feeling today about where we are, even more so than when I saw the film the first time. And it's the characters in the film are all different, but they're all so genuinely, authentically themselves. So, when the father, which is uh, Ethan Hawke, says, I'm, I'm just a father and I don't know what to do, in this crisis situation. But that how they keep dovetailing in and out of like, it's not really happening. It's okay in different ways. And then seeing something else happen. And then, but maybe we do have as humans this sort of, but maybe this will pass, or maybe there's nothing we can have to do or can do, then maybe things will be okay. Yeah, it's pretty it's it's amazing, and it's beautiful in the way that you made me just think about American Beauty.
Oh yeah.
How also that film took something that was kind of dark, very dark, and found the beauty in its characters and how to tell that story. And in contrast, you were made me think about what's the name of the film that it's pretty recent. It's in the shoes of photographers. Also
Oh, Civil War.
Civil War, yeah, because it's also it's such a different approach because you're right in the middle of it and all the violence of what happens if there's a coup. And so this was the opposite in such a beautiful way, like you said.
Yeah. Well, it just keeps reinforcing the idea that all these comforts are here. They're just not helping. The TV goes out, the Wi-Fi goes down, cell phones don't work, GPS fails. Ethan Hawke's character tries to go to the store but can't because he doesn't have the GPS and gets lost, which is fascinating and utterly credible in a really distressing way. That as you said, he has that amazing scene towards the end, the breakdown about how he's just trying to be a father and he doesn't know what to do. It's not that is weakness, right? Like the thing that I find so fascinating about Hawke is that he can play characters who are stuck inside their own heads and trying to get out, but also suggest like his whole thing is that he looks like a regular person. He doesn't look like a movie star. He's let himself age. He hasn't fixed his teeth. He's going gray. There's a million things. And Kevin Bacon is a really interesting contrast to him here because they're both people who we saw be young and beautiful and have now just turned into middle-aged men in great shape, obviously. But but they're both they're the polar opposites of masculinity in this film. Bacon's character is a prepper who's spent years preparing for whatever this is, and Hawke has just not thought about it and lived his academic life. He teaches literature and media studies, and he's just not ready for this. And Bacon's character isn't ready either. Like Danny doesn't know what's going on, and he will more likely blow his own foot off than he will actually stop the monsters coming to his door. But he projects confidence through disdain. And Hawke has this open-hearted empathy thing where he does want to help, but he can't. He, just as Amanda, as his wife, has gone to her biases and immediately judged GH and Ruth as dangerous black people, even though they showed up in formal wear and have keys to the cabinets and are completely obviously the real owners. I never, like that ambiguity never played to me. I never questioned for a second that they were who they said they were. But Roberts goes into this really unpleasant, brittle thing. And Hawke, as Clay, just gets to be the better person. He's constantly saying they can't be that bad. I'm sure it's fine. Let's listen to them. And the second he's confronted with someone who he doesn't see as an equal, this Spanish-speaking woman who he meets on the road to the store, who is panicked and incoherent and to him incomprehensible, he abandons her. And we have to sit in that with him, which I think is great too. There's no safe liberalism. There's no way through.
Yeah, that's such a dark moment for him. Oh my gosh, because he has to make such a choice there. Because he seems to be a caring, good person, like we all are and think we are.
Yeah.
And so he gets so confronted with that. I can't help you, and I'm going to leave you to possibly die, maybe, because it seems she's horrified and terrified. What a amazing moment, to have. And he commits to it completely as an actor, and obviously as a director. I mean, it's that great acting happens in films when directors, set the ground and let it happen.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all theirs. And he just did it so beautifully. But I have to say, the thing that I also love about the film too is that in all of this, so Julia Roberts' character, and this is always the thing that I confront when I'm making a film that's dark and has lots of dysfunction, is, what are the arcs of the characters, and how does anybody grow? Does anybody change? And I feel like Julia Roberts' character in the midst of this, in contrast to Ethan Hawke's character, actually does change and grow, because it's very clear from the beginning she's just so given up on people and just doesn't like people. And it's like very much clearly from a writing perspective, from a director's perspective, from her characters, an important part of that film. And it's so great to see her have to deal with the daughter, not her daughter, the daughter of, we talk in terms of the characters or the actors.
GH's daughter, Ruth, who's played by Mihala.
Because he's amazing too. Oh my gosh, what great characters, every one of them. And he loves his characters, and he gives every character a chance to be who they are and really be challenged and grow, And I think that Julia Roberts' character really grows, from not caring to caring, in a way, which is and like one of my favorite moments is when she has to growl and just be basically an animal to save the moment. It's like she gets back to, it's so symbolically beautiful but organic that she has to just growl to get back to who she is and how to survive in that moment. And she does. So there's some beautiful moments,
Oh yeah, she's I was honestly, it's one of those performances from her where you realize she's always been able to do anything, and just for decades she was boxed into the rom-com thing or the John Grisham drama thing, and she just wasn't allowed. I think she's really relishing at this point. It started with Erin Brockovich, obviously, where Soderbergh got that moment from her where she just can be both scrappy, contemptuous, a little bit unlikable, but utterly confident, still reminding us of the movie star quality of Julia Roberts, even as she got older. And now she's just doing whatever the hell she wants, and I think it's great. I'm all for Julia Roberts playing flinty, angry Karens.
Yep.
In really interesting contexts. And yeah, and Ruth even balances what Amanda says. She says, yeah, you're right, people are terrible, but they're all we have. And if this tiny group of, they're not even survivors yet. The thing is still going on. It ends as the real disaster happens. But there is the sense that they're all going to find some sort of mutual shelter, but I don't know that it's hopeful. Like, I don't know that there's a world left for them to save. That's the thing that I really like about this film, is that it is just a slow, despairing descent into the end of everything. And that pretty conclusively by the end of the film, when you watch the devastation in Manhattan across the water, normal is gone. And maybe, 10 years later, there's another society that rises up, because I have seen nothing but post-apocalyptic, post-dystopian, post-collapse narratives, primarily because they were easy to shoot during COVID. you took some people to a house and in the country, and you were secure for a couple of months, and you can make your movie. We premiered a film at TIFF just earlier this month called 40 Acres, which is about Black and Indigenous characters who've built a homestead for themselves after everything falls apart, and they're just constant. Oh, you saw it?
Yeah.
Hell of a movie.
Yeah.
Constantly repelling white would-be colonizers and settlers, and like that's not even a metaphor. That's the story. But it's loaded with such potency, and that one, the apocalypse has already happened. We missed it, but there's something about Leave the World Behind that has this eerie credulousness or credibility. Like it feels like we're watching the way this would go.
Yeah, it does. And every character has a different approach, and all of them might give them some comfort, some longevity. But yeah, it's hard to know that things will turn around or not. I guess that's not what the film's, it isn't. It's more about understanding your part in it and the process and the different characters. But the film has all these little, you call it Easter eggs, when they're like little symbols. Because like the White Lion, I think was the ship.
The tanker, yeah.
The tanker. But that was the name of the ship that brought all the slaves over. In, I think, 1619.
No, I did
which
not
is
know
the
that.
number on the radio. When you see the radio station, there's all these little, I could swear there's a picture of Frederick Douglass. I think it's the Huxley and Tanny Farms were plantations and white slave owner names.
Okay.
So those things are just there in the film too. And I think it just brings forward, even though, so or you don't know that, it doesn't affect your experience of the film if you don't. But I think it's worth calling out because it's just the director's very subtle, beautiful way of just marking those things and how they're so present still in all the doubt that this white family has about these two people who actually own the house and happen to be Black,
Yeah.
So it's sort of like amazing how, how far have we gone with that?
Yeah, we've normalized these aspects of America. So is this like an original sin situation where America is being taken apart by signifiers of its own horrible past, do you think? Because we never do find out what the attack is or how it's motivated. It's simply accompanied by all this disinformation. We're told that there are leaflets in either Chinese or Korean, someone relays to us in the West Coast, but in the East Coast, the leaflets are Arabic, pulled from a video game possibly, or legitimate. We will never find out. There are a lot of insinuations about why this is happening, but there's no real explanation. And so as the film points out, right, in the vacuum, all sorts of possible theories rush in.
Exactly. And I don't think he's trying to make anybody feel like we should be worried about any specific, because it's just, we've set up a world or a globe where we are kind of in opposition to many cultures. And it could easily be any of those, or just some kind of power thing happening. It doesn't necessarily have to be about a particular culture against another culture,
Right. And if it's an internal coup, which is the theory that's presented to us by, let's say, the most credible character in the film, then it would be to everyone's advantage within the coup to project
out to all those
exactly make everyone think it's someone else.
Yeah. So it's got so many layers, this film.
You'd mentioned Civil War, and the fact that Civil War is deliberately vague about the nature of its conflict actually bothered me more than the absence of any stuff here, just because Civil War clearly started out with Garland writing a Trump analog and Nick Offerman with the patriotic empty speeches, someone who dissolved the FBI and stayed on for a third term, this kind of logical projections of things that we imagine that Trump wants to do, and then just projected itself forward somehow long enough that enough time had passed that no one was talking about the whys of it anymore, which didn't make a great deal of sense to me. That journalists, I mean, I get the fact that focusing on journalists means that you don't have to talk about the reasoning because they already know, and they all know since they're information gatherers, but it did seem odd that there was just no larger sense of what the world looked like. They were just driving through a bunch of blasted places where still, people were around, but everyone had just adapted. The adaptation is the real horror, which is what we see in this film. Like Esmail's only interested in how people respond to the thing that's directly in front of them, right? Do you retreat into your comfort, or do you try to help the person across the table from you? And it turns out you can build a really interesting 2.25 hour movie out of that question, because each set of characters, they break off, they splinter, they go in different directions. There are all of these other permutations and senses that every single character is experiencing their own apocalypse. Archie, the teenage son, gets a tick bite and his teeth start falling out. That's not something that happens during a coup d'etat. That's something else that's wrong.
Although I think that the teeth, because I always was thinking about exactly the bug, but the teeth also was potentially related to the sound.
Havana syndrome.
But it could be either. But yes, it could be he just got a bug bite while he was in they were out searching in the woods for the deer.
Mm. I mean, that Havana syndrome thing did seem like a big leap to me, because everyone hears it and only Archie experiences the teeth thing. That feels like Esmail actively screwing with us and making Danny seem credible for a second. But all he offers him is Tylenol, I think. There's nothing that you can do to fix falling out teeth syndrome. But the larger aspect of it too, Ruth goes off and finds nothing. She keeps searching but never finds anything. She just finds herself in the same empty space that other people have been in. Rose, the youngest daughter, is constantly trying to watch the last episode of Friends, which is this great runner that makes no logical sense but does make perfect sense to a child. I was going through a couple of reviews after the fact this time, and I found a couple of people who got stuck on the idea that she was so obsessed with this. And it's like, have you never known an 11-year-old? They have all kinds of bizarre obsessions. And the other thing that's never stated in the script or in the film, but is so obvious, is that nobody cares because they've all seen it. Everybody else knows how Friends ends, and they won't tell her. No one ever just says, listen, this is how it goes. They just ignore it because Friends is this thing they're all soaking in. And Ruth has this little moment early in the Friends conversation where she says, that presents a 90s that never existed. We're nostalgic for something that doesn't exist.
That's such a great line. I loved that.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh.
And that's it, right? Everybody wants to be comfortable and safe, but they've never been comfortable and safe. Not really. This was always just, 3 clicks away from somebody else's mouse. And here they are.
Yeah, it's just he has so much beautiful symbolism without it being pasted on. It is organic to the characters. And it seems really right that as a young girl in this kind of crisis situation, it becomes even more important to her to find that whatever comfort that is for her, It is funny. It really does hit a nerve, because we watch all these series, and when a really good series comes along, whether it's Succession or whether, it's Friends for, a particular, there's a kind of like, you can't wait to get to it. Like, I don't know, there's been series that I just like, can't wait to watch the next, like Fargo, like I just love, that's my, but, or whether it's even, sometimes it's the intro music, but we do have these tranquilizers. And I think that's what that is. I mean, it's not just that she, it's very right for her age and her character to be obsessed with that show or be obsessed with a TV show to get away from reality. But I think we're all like that.
Hey, it's Norm, interrupting my own show to bring you up to speed on Shiny Things, my newsletter about physical media, culture, and the odd streaming project. This week, I'll be writing about Larry Fessenden's Blackout and Patricio Guzman's The Battle of Chile, among others, and I've just launched a new advisory feature for paid subscribers. Sign up for a 14-day free trial at shiny-things.ghost.io or find a link at the Simcast Blue Sky account. You like reading about movies? I like writing about them. Come check it out. The adult equivalent is the drinking. They're just constantly reaching for things or making cocktails and sharing recipes with each other. It's just this attempt over and over again to pretend everything is going to be okay. And the other thing looming over all of that is the near certainty that GH's wife, Ruth's mother, is never coming back from Morocco, that she was on a plane when this started, and that's not going well for anyone. And even if she lands, they might never see her again, even if she's alive, which she increasingly seems not to be, which is the thing that Mahershala Ali buries in his performance so eloquently. Like, there's just this quiet longing, this pause after everything, like he's trying so hard not to think about her. And then when Ruth brings it out and confronts him, he can't talk about it. He can't answer her. He's immediately making rationalizations like, the plane that I saw go down was a different airline than the one your mother flies. And like, that makes sense of anything. But this desperate attempt to cling to the idea that everything will be all right. Yeah, as you said, it's so simple and so cruel.
And I think, it also, as a parent, like, I have to say that in a crisis situation, which you find yourself in at different levels all the time, and then this is just really global crisis and personal crisis for them, is how, until you're certain about things, how much do you share with your children, because how to help them navigate what you are feeling and what or what may be, and you don't know, and how, what's the way to do that. But to me, again, the savior of the film too are scenes where, if we're going down, how do we live it? And that to me is so beautiful, really exposing characters and process. And so there's moments where you get to see Ethan Hawke and Ruth outside the pool enjoying each other. Or my favorite scene is the Julia Roberts and Mahershala Ali.
The dance.
Just dance together and just let go of everything and be like authentically their best selves, because there is no other time to live but now. And in this kind of situation, we're afforded how important that is too. I love that about the film.
Yeah, it's the one scene that shouldn't work because it just feels like, it feels scripted in a way that the others don't. Just the way that she surprises him with the deep cut from the Soul or the R&B album, and he watches her dance for a little bit before he starts to join her. And then I realized the second time through, like, it's all about denial. It's all about each of them trying to offer the other a safe space where the trauma isn't happening, and then it just goes a titch too far. But I really, that scene the first time through, I was just like, really, would this happen? And it's like, of course this would happen. People are desperate. People are uncertain and panicked and trying to demonstrate, cocktail party behavior. Again, it goes back to the constant drinking, but I think it is also a subtle suggestion that these people are doing whatever they can to anesthetize themselves against this existential mortal terror that they must be feeling at every given second. Like, is this the last night the lights are on? Is this the last night the fridge works? Is this the last chance you have for something that will be someday gone forever? Like, just dancing to an R&B track with a new friend.
What else would you do? I mean, it is sort of like, I was just thinking like, gosh, yeah. I don't know. I thought it was a terribly beautiful moment, in that. And they did, it's also, because they are the best, the two of them together, and so different. And, Julia Roberts really let herself be uncool, everything, and then find the humanity and the connection. And they, and it's like, that's why I just think, what a great director, like first of all, to write this script and then just really make it happen. Because it's one thing, writing a good script is very difficult, but making it really happen authentically, or whatever happens to the script you wrote, because you see films sometimes where the director is the writer and their vision on the page stays the vision, like they're just, making that. And it feels to me like whatever he wrote, he just then still made a great film. You know what I mean? Like he went beyond because he worked with who he had as actors, and he probably shaved away or whatever. I'm just imagining, because there's not a moment in the film that's not needed. The edit, everything is beautiful. There's nothing wasted. There's nothing indulgent. Like at the end of that scene where they dance, he doesn't feel the need to make them get in bed,
Yeah, because they wouldn't. And like, that is too far. I guess that was my initial hesitation too, is like, this could never happen because it wouldn't progress to that point. But that's not what the scene is about. Like, it's just not about them sleeping together.
But yet it's so sensual.
It is.
And erotic in a way,
Yeah. It's vulnerability. Vulnerability is definitely sexy in this film.
Yeah. It's so nice to see that and not feel like it has to go to that other place because the audience wants it or expects it or whatever we think, but,
Yeah.
As filmmakers,
Yeah, it's not. Nothing about this film panders, which is really great. And I've also loved retrospectively the Tesla mass suicide, which now it's a great eerie image. It's striking. It's weird. And now, of course, it just seems preposterous that you could make a Tesla do anything that complicated.
Yes. No. Yeah. That was crazy.
Yeah.
What a great scene.
Which was received at the time as, oh my God, look at this incredible criticism of the creatures, the machines that we build for ourselves that won't obey us. It's like, they're just smashing each other. It's totally fine. And I honestly, the second time through, I really did enjoy watching a lot of Teslas just get smashed, even though it's probably CG and therefore their real cars are fine.
You had a lot of foresight there.
To go back to vulnerability, because that was just me being mean for fun, there is something that sort of links the nerviness of what Roberts is doing and the quiet assertion of Ali's presence with the flailing that Hawk gets to do. Because, again, he is the guy who I'm pretty sure could build a porch if he needed to, and he's playing someone who is completely at sea. The second the phones go out, he just doesn't know what to do. And that scene with Bacon, that climactic moment where Clay puts himself in the middle of this situation that he didn't create and could, again, like this time he could walk away. It would be awful, but he could just wait it out and let it resolve and then take his kid somewhere else. He chooses to push himself right into it. And it's the first time he stands up rather than kind of hesitantly asking questions or wondering if maybe we could do things a different way, or, just baselessly asserting that everything's going to be all right. And Hawk doesn't play it as commanding or confident. Like, the fact that he is willing to be on the verge of tears and panic is such a great, like, it's a great window into the character. It's great service to the story. It is, like, I think the master statement of the film, which is that we are simply not prepared to be the people that movies have taught us we need to be. But Esmail doesn't cut away either. He just lets him sit in it. And the time of the pacing of that scene is excruciating because it really could go any way. Either of the other guys could shoot him. They could shoot each other.
Right. Totally.
And it really is just about pleading for the normalcy that doesn't exist anymore. And I love that the button on it after this incredible moment is we just watch Kevin Bacon counting money and talking about how the barter system reasserted itself, and Hawk in the corner, Clay just grumping that, well, it's not really a barter system. He's actually counting physical money and needing to be right? Like needing to be the guy who was right all along in this argument. He hasn't changed. He's just been brave, which I think is a wonderful way of undercutting this like potential Oscar moment or whatever you want to call it. They're not interested in that. Like, nobody made this movie for the awards.
Yeah, well, gosh, there's so many things you said. Like, yeah, I just think it's so great. It rode the edge of, does Kevin Bacon's character give in because Ethan Hawke presents the conundrum of, like, he finally gets hit. He presents that compassion example to him, which is like, I'm doing what you would do because because he's protecting his own.
Yep.
And he gives him that moment to kind of say, oh, exactly what you were saying this is about. Do we help the person on the other side of the table? Or not just do we help the person but do we choose to connect, with people? You know what I mean? I think that's like, do we allow ourselves to be touched and connect? And then I guess out of that comes compassion, maybe, but he like gets it. So he almost lets you decide which way it went, because it's kind of like he gives him that moment, and then the things sort of do turn, but he also sits there with the money. So you can decide for yourself if it was both of those things or one of them or whatever, which I love too. But you're so right that tension of that scene of just going out on a limb for Ethan Hawke. His character actually has an arc in this film too, in that wonderful. He's great, man. That was, and Kevin Bacon was so perfect. He just did it in such a subtle, over the top way, but he really inhabited that character, and was that character's, conscience and lawyer in a way, completely.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so you really get that guy. You really get the guy that he plays, and you're like, I see it. That could be me.
Yeah. Esmail gave him full credit in that podcast for dimensionalizing the guy. He said he wasn't even sure when he wrote it. He wasn't sure how he would direct it or how you would get someone to play it. But Bacon just has this groundedness to him. He's not sharing conspiracy theories to the point where you don't want to be around him. He thinks he's reliable. Like, he thinks he's putting out real information and he's trying to help in his own way. He just doesn't want to actually help. He wants them to leave. But he can't stop talking, which I find really interesting. Like, every conspiracy nut believes they're the only person who knows the real truth, right? So of course he would want to, but he doesn't brag about it. He's simply stating the facts as he understands them. And in a way, trying to just demonstrate, look, I know what I'm doing. Go pack yourselves in a shelter. I can't help you. I won't help you. Just this is what you need to know to survive. Like, he thinks he's helping, But the violence, like the fact that he's doing all of this with a shotgun in his arm, is, you can't miss that. Like he doesn't want to use it, I don't think, because Kevin Bacon gives him that. Like Ali, GH has a line about how that might not even be loaded. But yeah, I'm pretty sure it's loaded. Just the way that Bacon asserts himself, it's loaded. He doesn't want to use it, but it's loaded.
And what about all the deer?
They don't have shotguns. They're less of a threat.
You know?
Although the deer, the natural world in chaos, right? There's a reference to some sort of environmental effect in the South, an event that's messed up migration patterns. But I'm assuming that's true. It still doesn't explain what they want from people, which is really the most unnerving thing. Esmail seems to think that they're warning us, that they know something bad is coming, the same way, dogs can predict earthquakes and things. And that's just their way of showing up. But they also seem genuinely threatening in a way that I don't think that explanation accounts for.
Well, I mean, I can't help think too. I mean, I live in, the suburbs of the city, and there's deer everywhere, and they continue to close in on us because it is nature and us. It is, and like, how do we live together? I was just in Fire Island, and the deer are all over. There's at the point where they will follow you down the street. So I've never seen that before. So there's a real, like, it is that kind of, the wild turkeys here where and I'm only half an hour from the city. It's like the wild turkeys like descend on us. Like, it's like really like, that's because, there is a definite, challenge between how do we live together. But yes, I do think the animals all know. I do think the animals know. Birds know, so they definitely know about migration and what's coming, and it's pretty. We have to look at them more, and it's really interesting that the youngest girl in, I think the daughter, Julia Roberts' daughter, is the youngest, who's you can almost say right off to, oh, she's just obsessed with Friends. Mm-hmm. But she's also curious, and she's the one who is the only one she's the first one to see the boat, and she's the first one to see that. And she's the almost only one who sees the deer constantly.
Yeah.
And so that's sort of interesting.
Yeah, I think she's just open to it maybe in a way that the adults aren't, because she's unoccupied. I think she doesn't set tasks for herself. Once the screen goes down and she can't watch the last episode of Friends, she's just free to wander around, and nobody really gets in her way or tries to call her back. I mean, sometimes Archie is with her, but yeah, she's also telling Archie, there's a deer staring at me in a funny way, and he's busy staring at Ruth's bikini, so that doesn't work for him. It's, yeah. And then in the end, I guess it's implied she's going to be the only one who rides this whole thing out, because she's already in the bunker watching that last DVD of Friends, which, again, let's hear it for physical media and generators. But it's not an upbeat ending. I think it feels like a thumb in the eye of anybody who expects to get a comforting hug at the end of this. The thing that Friends delivers is not the thing that this movie is into.
Yeah, when I finished watching that film, I'm not depressed. It's important. You know what I mean? I'm not depressed. I'm like, yeah, this is the way it is. And this is the way we are. And maybe this is where we're going. And it just leaves me with the question, what are we going to do? What can we do, and how do we live? That's what the film just makes you feel, and that sounds so big and broad, but when a film makes you experience those questions and kind of get in touch with them, well, I think that's such a gift,
Oh yeah, I love a good open-ended ending. I like being left with my thoughts and just sort of abandoned to think about what I've done or what I would do.
And it is so, he takes so much artistic license in subtle ways, like even the production design, the, the choice of locations are great. The house, the shots, really help you see things from afar and then also get right in with them. And I think that's hugely important. I love that it's subtle, but like the painting on the wall behind Julia Roberts' bed that they're sleeping in at this house changes.
Yeah.
That, and I did notice it the first time, but it's just sort of like subtle, but it's like, whoa, now they're right in the ocean. It's just like all those little things. And they don't, and sometimes things like that take you out of a film, but it didn't. I never felt like those things, because he was always having fun, like painting the picture and then letting you live in it, and you would, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, even with Homecoming, with the first season of Homecoming, his decision to score the whole thing with snippets of 70s and 80s horror movies. I just found, once I figured out what was going on, once I started catching bits of the Dead Zone and Halloween 2, it's just like, this is the whole Universal Horror Library. And why is he doing that? And it's just simply to put you off, to unsettle you in a story that otherwise should be very, very conventionally told, or sort of expects to be conventionally told. You are catching things from other places in the same way that the changing paintings just makes some part of your brain look a little closer at these images. It's just unnerving enough, and it's different. His methods are different every time, and I do love that about his work. He just keeps finding new ways to make me feel ungrounded.
Yeah, it's what a way. I mean, it's just like everything to me that, filmmaking. There's other filmmakers that do incorporate all these elements in a completely different way. I can think about Ang Lee. I always think about, like, this make me think about, like, one of my favorite films of his is Ice Storm. Um, I, and yes, this Life of Pi is wonderful, but Ice Storm I always thought was so wonderful. And I think Soderbergh really does that really well in different ways. But this film was just, I feel like it's a must see. And the fact that it didn't even get any Oscar nods, did it?
No, not a one.
No, it was like ignored.
I don't think Netflix got behind it. I still get the packages for Critics Guilds. I'm still a member of the Toronto Film Critics Association, and I get the occasional push. And this year it was Fair Play, Maestro, and May December that they supported the strongest. Oh. And everything else just kind of went sideways, I think.
Oh, wow. So you think that's sort of how it happened? Wow.
I think it was the kind of movie that Netflix needed a really hard push for. And for whatever reason, they threw their weight behind those films instead. And it didn't work out so great for any of them, really.
I think this film could have been like, best film, that's just so much, or some, or at least the performances and the film. And of course the director, because how can you separate the film from the director? But yeah.
You can never make the world work the way you want it to, which is actually the whole point of the film.
Point of the film. I think it's going to have longevity, this film. And maybe, it's one of those films that sometimes people appreciate more and more later.
I think so. Yeah. I mean, there's also a timeless quality to it, in the sense that I think there's never not going to be a point where America doesn't feel like it's 2 hours from falling apart, at least the way things are currently going. And that's a whole other depressing conversation. I mean, it's not exclusive to America. America's just better at broadcasting. It's division and chaos, I think. And I say this as a dual citizen. Canada's no slouch at this, but the U.S. just has, division is its strength in a really horrible way now.
Yeah. I mean, but thank you for making me answer this question, because I kept thinking, like, oh my God, well, persona. I was thinking, because I do love Ingmar Bergman, and I was so deeply affected by the film Persona and other. But then I was like, I have to go back and watch that film again. So what film is now that I've seen that? And it just then this was the film. And I was talking to my partner, my husband, who wrote The Arrival, which is the film we have coming out, and he feels the same way about this film. And I was like, thank you. This is the first film that came into my mind, but I dismissed it because I thought it was too, it's out there now, I should reach way back.
Oh, I see.
So then I started trying to force myself to look way back, but this was the first film that came to my mind, and I was like, thank you. I'm going to say this film.
Oh no, first thought, best thought. It's
Yes.
I mean, the impulse is the thing. The thing that I love about the podcast is that I get to find out what people would choose, and then I can sort of weigh it against their own work and see whether there's a connection. And I couldn't really find one with The Arrival, other than the idea that people are trapped with each other in circumstances that their life changing, but they're not civilization altering. But of course, when something as important as the events in The Arrival or on the edge of the periphery of The Arrival happen, it feels like the whole world is changing. So, I mean, you could dramatically make the argument that they're not that far apart.
Yeah, the characters there are all in a very deeply challenging crisis because of the dysfunction in their lives, which is universally, in that way, a little bit, it's not the world, but it's their world.
Mm-hmm.
Being drugged, one of them, and not knowing the answer, and being in an addictive relationship that's dysfunctional for the bartender, and them coming out of it, because that was very important to me, that there be an arc and an evolution to the characters, and that they have some kind of healing or potential something, and I think that character, Ember and Lincoln.
You think they have a shot?
Well, they do, because they do grow, and they do connect, and they do come out, they take themselves out of, particularly Ember takes herself out of the environment that's not working for her, and finds another, and finds some help too.
Yeah, I do think it's really heartening that The Arrival does sort of end on the same sort of note as Leave the World Behind, which is that if we are going to survive, we have to do it together, that no one can get through it alone.
Yeah, and the character Lincoln is so, I loved the actor too. So he really became the part, and he has something very special. He's a really wonderful listener, which is as we worked on it, he became better and better at trusting that that's what he was doing and taking things in. And just so, he's just such a receptive character, and he doesn't judge everybody else's, quirks and dysfunctions and problems, but kind of tries to work with them. And as a result, he ends up being able, like, they kind of grow together, in a little bit. But yeah. And the other characters too are very much in pairs. So each, there's pairs of people, just very, I don't mean to draw lines to film because it's such a great film, but I mean, they are all in pairs. Like, there's the girl who's really looking for her brother because she's feeling very disconnected to her family and herself. And so she's looking for her brother through this 23andMe thing, but she's there with a sort of mentor friend who's a little older than her, she knows from school, who, together they actually both find something, In fact, her friend who's older was just going to help her friend out. finds a story that's important, so tries to tell it, or is doing her best. And
yeah, and leaning on each other for support, even though they don't know they're doing it.
Right. And the other pair, which is the girl who's, she's a school teacher and an art teacher, and she's with her friend who's a law student, is just like, she doesn't necessarily even want the help, but they're getting together because they both need to connect. And she's confided in her friend that what happened, because she had to survive. She had to tell somebody. And now her friend's taken upon herself, whether it's for her own sort of law, her own, like, I would say, to try to prove herself as a young lawyer or not, or to also to try to do something for a friend because she cares. So she's kind of pre-Julia Roberts character. She really cares,
My thanks to Alyssa Rallo Bennett, whose new drama, The Arrival, is now available on digital and on demand from Gravitas Ventures. Thanks also to Karen Oberman. She knows what she did. You can find Alyssa on Instagram at Alyssa Rallo Bennett, all one word, and you can find Leave the World Behind streaming on Netflix. You can find me on Blue Sky at Norm Wilner, and you can find this podcast there at Semcast, S-E-M-Cast, and on the web at someoneelsesmovie.com. The first year of the show is still available for just $20 at payhip.com/Semcast. That's the first 52 episodes of Someone Else's Movie, 44 of which aren't currently available anywhere else. And check out my newsletter, Shiny Things, at shiny-things.ghost.io. I think you'll enjoy it. Our theme song is by The Last Year. If you like it, or the show in general, please say so. Leave a review wherever you've been listening. Every little bit helps. It truly does. And check out the other shows on the Frequency Podcast Network while you're doing that. Stay safe, watch movies, wear a mask if you go out, get the new booster as soon as you can. I'll see you next week.